Evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining tonight's webinar. We've got Dr. Tawhid Nazir and Murray Welsh on the call. And the webinar is really going to be focused about squat practices and the different approaches we can take when setting up a squat practice, and a couple of case studies as well. So I don't know if you, Murray, you want to introduce yourself first and then Tawhid.
Thanks, Georgina. Yeah, great to see everyone on the call. It's going to be recorded as well, so it'll be made available later. And whilst tonight's webinar is mostly about squat practices, it's also refurbishments, expansions, etc. So I'm Murray Welsh, one of the directors here at Anglian Dental. Anglian Dental is a family business, third generation, started in the 90s, and we're focused on designing, building, and fitting out dental practices. I've been working in the business now for 15 years and had the pleasure of, I think last year we did 32 squat projects, and looking forward to trying to share some nuggets of advice tonight. Over to you, Tawhid.
My name is Dr. Tawhid Nasir. I'm the practice principal of a dental practice called Lower Early Family Dental, which is based in Lower Early, which is a suburb in Reading, Berkshire. I had the privilege of working with Anglian Dental on my own squat project 5 years ago, 2020, 2021. I was the smart guy who decided to open a squat during COVID, so I'll talk about that later on. And I'm here just to talk about my experience with squat projects and give my little 2 cents on the whole experience.
Good, thanks both. I think we'll kick off with just going over the cost. There's obviously the cost of the quote, but there's actually other costs as well involved in setting up a squat. So I don't know if you wanted to kick off there, Murray.
Yeah, sure. We'll come on in a second to just some definitions. This webinar is about looking at a turnkey approach and also a piecemeal approach. There's no right or wrong. Every situation is different. And I think that what we'll just talk over today or tonight is finding the right approach for you. Every situation is different. So I thought we'd just kick off by giving some content sort of background to this and looking at the 3 different buckets or the 3 different areas of cost when you're doing a squat. There's 3 things we like to make our clients consider. One is your time, the cost of your time, and how much of your time you can spend, particularly when it comes to managing a project. The second one is the cost of the quote. So no doubt you're getting quotes for a squat, looking at the headline figures of the cost for the quotes, whether that be turnkey or piecemeal, and also project completion. And I think it's really important to consider all 3 when you're looking to do a squat. Project completion, what we mean by that is how quickly the project will be done and how quickly you'll be open and earning a return from that investment. So there are 3 areas when you look at a squat. It's got your time invested, you've got the cost of the quote, and you've got the cost of how soon you can open. Time is money, as we all know. So I thought that would be helpful just to raise that early on and just so we all factor that in. And then I also want to just cover off what we mean by the different terms. When we talk about a turnkey approach or a piecemeal approach, just the definitions of those. So we've got a slide for that. So just to clarify, in general terms, when it comes to doing projects, there's the option of a piecemeal approach, which is where you'd have generally a separate designer, separate builder, sometimes interior designer separately. Sometimes you might have several contractors within that build team, be it electricians, aircon, and then you generally have an engineering company who then supply your dental equipment. And this approach is where they all work together and bring the project to fruition. One of the biggest questions we get asked in our work is, do I go the turnkey route or do I go the piecemeal route? In contrast to that is a turnkey approach. And this approach is where you're trusting one company or a couple of companies with the entire project. So that is from start to finish, generally the design, the build, and the fit out, in this case, the dental equipment. So that's generally what we mean by the two different terms before we use them loads throughout the call. No one knows what they mean. And we wanted to kick off just by looking at some case studies, really. We've got Dr. Tahid Nazir tonight. He did a project with us, and he actually went the piecemeal approach for most of the project. And we've got a case study of a piecemeal project, and we've got one of a turnkey project as well. And thought it'd be good to just bounce through those, what they look like, what they cost, how long they took, and try and give some information around both routes so that our customers can be best informed as to the route they take.
One thing I'd like to add, Murray, if you wouldn't mind,
Please.
these are two very different approaches, and understanding where you are within your career, your financial situation, and what your practice goal and aesthetic is will help determine whether you're a turnkey character or a piecemeal character. And depending on how you go, whether it's your first project, second, third refurbishment, you may change. And that's something I'll mention as we go further on. As Murray mentioned, I was piecemeal at the time that I initially started, and I'll add on to that later on. But one thing I need to emphasize is knowing yourself as a clinician, as a potential practice principal and owner, and where you see your practice going and what you want out of this experience, and to understand whether you're a turnkey or a piecemeal, because understanding that is the most important thing in the start of this whole process, because you can get yourself into a bit of trouble if you're taking the wrong approach, even if you have the best intentions.
Very good, thank you. Good, so I'll just move on. We thought it would be helpful to look at like real life case studies, real life examples. So we have here Angel Dental Implant Centre, which is in the heart of London. This is a project we did probably 2 or 3 years ago now, I'll say. Worked alongside the principal dentist here. We were just instructed for the equipment, 2 dental surgeries, CBCT, cabinetry, and we worked alongside the client's architect, and the client had a friend who was sort of a builder who had done refurbishment work at his house. So we worked alongside the build team and the designer. Here's some images. It's quite a wacky practice actually. It's a nice frontage to it. It's got some nice crystal glass in it, some nice ceiling details, which can change colour. So it's obviously a fully private practice. The dentist does a lot of implants. So there's a floor plan, I think, in the next slide. Oh, sorry, it's just a surgery layout. But thought I'd just run through the economics on this one. This is an 800 square foot practice. Had 2 surgeries and a CBCT. It's an empty shell. The project took about 16 weeks from start to completion, but it was a reasonably high spec. As you can see from the photos, quite a lot of design went into it. Prox cost there of 350 plus VAT. Now, overall the project went well, but because it was a piecemeal, there were some challenges with it. It is important to recognise the challenges. As an example, one of the challenges was regards to the pipe work. So, as with every dental practice, installing suction pipe work correctly is vital. And when working with a builder, it's very important that they understand what they have to run in. Now, in this instance, unfortunately, the builder ran in the incorrect pipe work and ran it in too small a diameter, but there's also the wrong material. So he ran in ABS pipe work rather than UPVC. Now, you can't tell this stuff because it looks exactly the same. And the floors went down. And when we came to install the equipment, we realised, unfortunately, he'd run the wrong pipe work. So what that meant was the floors had to come up, had to be all opened up again, and then new pipe work run in. It was quite a disruption, and it was quite awkward because it delayed the whole program. Now that's just one example. Not in any way trying to pour any negative light on how the project went, but it is just an example of how communication between parties, whether it be an engineering company and the build company not understanding the importance of it, or whether it be a a designer who can design something that looks amazing, but when they come to cost it, it's way out the budget, or it's completely impractical, or it doesn't comply with current regs, or it's not able to be used by, functionally, are challenges that we do come across when working on piecemeal projects. And that communication sometimes can lead to site delays, it can lead to unexpected costs, it can lead to tensions, it can lead to delays. So whilst there are benefits to the piecemeal, which we'll come on to, this was a successful project, but it didn't happen without its challenges. And the project duration was, there we go, 16 weeks. It was longer than it would typically be for a site which is relatively small. Having said that, still delivered a fantastic project, looks great. And from a cost perspective, I mean, the costs on this were quite high, but that's mostly because the spec was high. But yeah, that's an overview of Angel Dental Implant Center. Did you want to add anything there, Zahid?
No, I'll come on to it when I talk about my case study, but pipe work will rear its head again. So I'll talk about that and real life implications on my day-to-day surgical experience, but I'll save that for myself shortly.
Very good, thank you. So this is another project which we completed I think it was last year, was it, George? Yeah, I think they opened last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, end of last year.
It's in South London. It's quite compact, but it's a lovely practice. 2 surgeries. I think it's got space for a third, if I'm not mistaken. Great squat. It's 1,200 square foot we've got here. It's an older estate building, but it's a nice empty shell. We fitted out 2 surgeries initially with a CBCT, space for a third. Project was done within 10 weeks, mid-spec. Now, this was a project which we did turnkey on. So there's no one else involved in that sense. We designed it right from the layout. We did all the technical design, the building control drawings. We installed all the services, constructed all the walls, all the building fit out works, and then we fitted all the equipment. Now, the main point with this was it was much smoother because it was all coordinated, and we took responsibility for ensuring what we designed was compliant and was fully adequate to serve purposes from a compliance point of view, but also from a building regulations point of view, radiation perspective, CQC, also from a technical perspective. So this was a successful project from a turnkey side. Happened smoothly. It needed minimal involvement from the client. Didn't have any sort of upsets as such. There's always snags and a few bits and bobs to work through at the end of a project, but that's fairly normal on any program. So that's Palm Dental. That is a turnkey approach. And yeah, I thought we'd move on now. The next slide. So this is just an example of a program. So when doing any project, it's super important to have a works program, and this is absolutely vital whichever way you go in your project. And I really recommend whatever approach you take to your project to sit down and write a really detailed program, because this can make a big difference. This is something as a fit out company we would do ourselves the whole time. This is a real life example. Project we're actually running on live at the present, where every item of works is listed and it's given a day, so that when you're overseeing your project, you can tell exactly where you are against program and how its program is tracking. Right down to bottom right where you have your completion date. So this is really important to make sure this is in place before work start, because what can happen in any project, particularly if the piecemeal route is taken, is that projects grow arms and legs, just get delayed and just delayed and delayed. Because if there's no specific agreement up front as to what's happening and when, and the handover date, then dates can slide, and that is where project costs really go up, where there's delays and you're not opening because you're waiting for something or something hasn't been ordered in time. Whereas programming this out before work start on site is super important, and would thoroughly recommend that to everyone who's doing a project, really, to make sure a program is written out and kept to. Good. So I'll open up a bit now and get Tahid and Georgina involved as well. But we just wrote down here some pros and cons of of a piecemeal approach and also the turnkey approach. Feel free to screenshot, but this is looks at the pros and cons of both and helps hopefully your clients to make a weighted decision, a calculated decision on the right approach for them. The piecemeal approach, the pros to it, usually appears more cost effective. Generally, the upfront quotes are less because there's very little management in there. And if you're a hands-on person and you understand the building trade and enjoy getting involved, having control over a project, then it can be really rewarding. It can be fun. You can control exactly how it goes, and it does need though a lot of time. So on some of the challenges with it, what you've got here is time. It take a lot more of your time to manage it yourself and recognize that you don't necessarily know the intricacies of opening product squats or doing refurbishments. There's a lot to consider, a lot of crossover. So you might make a decision to, for example, have a feature wall and then realize that actually that feature wall needs aircon in the middle of it, or it's missing services, or the wall can't support it, or there's lots of impacts of those decisions. So you need a lot of time to coordinate it. There's also a higher chance of variations. Variation is where there's a cost implication to that. So whilst you're on site, a common theme which we hear is that, for example, a build team might not realize they need to run lead lining, or they might not realize they need to run auxiliary ducts to the chairs. So at that point, they're then saying, oh, sorry, that's not in our quote, I need a variation for that. And you have a higher chance of variation costs, which are unexpected, because not always do the contractors involved appreciate what's required. Whereas generally with a turnkey approach, it's all designed out, all the details gone through, and if it's been properly designed by experts, then there's nothing unforeseen because it's all in the initial design. Tahid, anything else you wanted to cover from that? Any other factors?
I'll bring them up in my case study bit, but just some overviews. Just for me, I basically had to be a project manager, so I had to do all the liaising between Anglian, between the builders, the Sparkies. Sparkies are electricians, for anyone who doesn't know that slang term. Basically, I was a project manager on a construction site with no construction experience. I was blessed to have the time, which I'll explain when I do my case study and explain my story. But time is the one commodity that you do not get back in life. So if you are going to do the piecemeal approach, please don't think that it's something that's not going to basically take over your life and be all you think about. Because for me, it was very substantially that, while I was balancing other stuff, which I'll mention a bit later on. But that's the one point that I need to get across. And I think anyone listening to this is most likely going to be a busy associate or already owning a practice that's maybe mixed, because I've talked to a few of my colleagues who are in this position where they own a mixed practice and is going smoothly. They've seen the wave of squat practices open. As Murray said, he opened 32 last year, which is fantastic, and there's a great wave of it, but it's a double-edged sword because money doesn't grow on trees. And one thing I will say about squat dentistry, it is a money pit, and your money does disappear very fast. So you need to have a good runway there of funds to manage those unforeseen costs. But I'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly.
Very good. Thanks, Tahid. So the turnkey approach, there's pros and cons of this as well. One of the cons would be initially it is more expensive. The quotes generally do present themselves as more. There's a lot more in them, but generally, if you look at the end result, if you factor in everything in terms of any hidden costs or variations, generally, I personally believe it's not actually a cheaper, more expensive approach to use a turnkey way. Have done that analysis on a couple of projects and can prove it on paper. But the pros, I would definitely state that from a distraction point of view, if you are a busy associate, you've got a family, you're struggling with, or not struggling, but you've got a lot on your plate, if you like. Turnkey might be for you. If you need to focus on your clinical work, keep an income going. You can leave the project to someone who knows what they're doing, experienced in it, can manage it for you, and with minimal time involvement, perhaps a meeting a week, or WhatsApps, rather than having to last minute rush down to your project to make a decision or to crisis management. It's a lot less stress, and the big thing is it's delivered faster. So we hear stories of projects going on for 6 months sometimes. 6 months to open a practice, as in the building works, is obviously depends the complexity and the size of it, but generally with a turnkey approach where the team's all coordinated, the designers all agreed, you can knock out a squat an awful lot cheaper and get open and get you bringing a income in, a return on your investment much faster. The other point is just the control. It's more predictable from a cost outcome. There are sometimes with building works projects, there are unforeseens. You check a floor and you find a well, as one we found recently, or things you don't expect to come across. But generally, on a turnkey approach, the cost you're looking at up front is pretty close to what it turns out to be. Good. I just thought now I'd hand over to Heath. This is his practice in Lower Early, and I thought Heath would give us a run through on his experience and his insights.
Murray, just a question. What spec would you consider mine? Mid?
Yeah, I'd say elements of it are mid. The equipment, for example, is entry level, but it can be upgraded. So it's a great starting block, and that's the approach a lot of squats take.
Yeah, so my story, just briefly, I graduated, so I'm a local boy from Reading, did all my schooling there. I decided to do dental school abroad. So I studied in Australia, did my sort of 5-year dental education over there, and then worked there after I graduated. Moved back to the UK, had to do the overseas registration exam. I'd worked at a number of different practices in Australia and sort of saw how different principals ran a practice, and I thought it was time for me to give it a go. I had a specific view on how dentistry should be done, and for me, I'm a very much a people's person, and I look beyond the teeth, and I needed that to come through in my practice. During the time I built my squat, I had the time. I wasn't working anywhere else. I was focusing on doing the ORE exam. So I was in that category, unlike a lot of people looking at building squats, where I was time rich. Aside from studying, I was in a fortunate financial position to actually project manage. So I did a bit of research, looked at a few different companies, and then came across Murray and Lloyd. I'm from a background of family businesses, entrepreneurial family, and that kind of spoke to me. I was very fortunate to have Murray and Lloyd both come out and see my building, which you can see in that bottom image. So my practice is solely based on the ground floor of that building, and it's 2 surgeries and a decon, patient bathroom, and reception area. For me, I took on this project purely like a startup generic business. So I bootstrapped it, which is the term. So I tried to keep the cost as low as humanly possible because I decided not to take any loans and cash it all out of my pocket. So for me, the cost was the leading factor in every decision I made. And that's why I ended up going piecemeal, because of my family's background in business and property. We had a lot of connections in the building trade, the electrician trade. So the building side came a bit easier for us. We've crunched the numbers. So my building cost was 100,000. That's because the ground floor was used as an office space. So we initially had to knock down all the walls and strip it back to the studs. And then we had to put the lead lining separation, all the walls up. So that project, that part of the project, the building side, cost 100,000. And then another 30,000 went into an air conditioning system and ventilation, which any of you listening know in dentistry is paramount. And then the Anglian side of the fit out cost was around 90,000, including VAT. So it was about 70 odd thousand plus VAT. And that was for the 2 Belmont voyages that you see in the image, the whole decon setup, the X-rays, the compressors, and all the fun stuff that goes with building a practice. For me, the lessons I learned, I mentioned piping earlier. So I had those builders that have no dental background. They put the holes in the ground and put the piping in. Piping, whether you know or don't know, has some give depending on the material, and it can stretch somewhat. But obviously, you don't want to stretch it too much because it can tear. How that works out in day-to-day life for me is the piping obviously goes in and feeds the water and electrics, which sits under the chair. So the chair position and how far it can actually go back are determined obviously by the piping and the position of the chair. So commonly for me on a daily basis, I don't have what one would call a lot of room behind the headrest to swing my chair around. So it's a constant conversation between me and my nurse going, "Oi, you get out of the way so I can get the stuff out of the drawers." And I mentioned it to Murray earlier, that's a constant. And that in your day-to-day life as a working dentist, a lot of you will experience that who have been in smaller surgeries where space is compact, needing to do a little tango around each other, having to move and adjust. That issue came all the way back to planning and implementation. So that's one example of how the planning phase ends up looking from a practical perspective. For me, I went piecemeal to start with. And if I did it again, because of the cost for me in the financial position I was in, piecemeal was the right choice at that time. Now that we're sort of 5 years on, it was COVID, so we had a lot of delays. My project was one of those that was typically, as Murray mentioned, a piecemeal situation where, as I mentioned, I was project managing, I was liaising between Anglian, builders, electricians, all sorts of different people. I had the time. That's what I need to emphasize to you. Speaking to colleagues and friends who are looking at doing squats is something I do quite regularly because people know my journey. And the advice I give them is if you're a busy associate and earning dental income, earning dental income is funding your actual practice build, then I would personally lean towards a turnkey approach. But as I mentioned, when those 2 slides came up, and Murray's mentioned this when we chat, and I'm sure he'll add on to this at the end, is that a turnkey approach is not right for everybody. A piecemeal approach is not right for everybody. I emphasized knowing which kind of character you are. If you're a me, where you've got some funds, whether that be from a loan, whether that be from savings, personal inheritance, wherever you get your money is your business, but you've got a pool of money and you've got time, then the piecemeal approach is right for you. Also, if you are quite specific on your vision for your practice, apologies, if you want to micromanage every aspect and that is interesting to you, then the piecemeal approach, from my opinion, is the way to go. Now, as someone who's a practice principal, who's got through the most challenging parts of owning a squat, which anyone will tell you is the first 3 to 5 years of any business. A lot of businesses close within the first year, more close within the first 3 years. Then if you make it over that hurdle 3 years onwards, genuinely you do okay. As someone who had their anniversary just in June of our 3 years, I can say that I can attest to that we've had some stabilization and we've got through that initial rocky hurdle. But what I would say is that if you're a busy associate, if you're busy with any other aspect of life, if you've got a family and you're already time poor, because if you're not with your family, you're working, then maybe a turnkey approach is the way to go. You've heard my costs. My costs were roughly all in about £225,000, including VAT. But please do factor in that was 5 years ago and pre-COVID. So inflation has hit that figures quite substantially. That's one point I'd like to make. And my project most definitely was one of those projects that Murray spoke about that was up towards that 4, 5, 6 months, because we had to knock everything out. We had to rebuild. There were delays getting raw materials shipped in because of COVID. There was an issue with Belmont during that time because, am I right, Murray, in Japan that the Belmonts are manufactured and then shipped over here and built. So as you can imagine, international freight from Japan over to the UK was halted quite substantially. And I don't know, Murray, what was the wait time? A year at one point? Was it longer during COVID?
Yeah, that's sort of, I think 10 months at one point, yeah.
So as you can imagine, my project, if I'm very honest, ended up going 6 months to a year. But I, as I said, was in a very fortunate position that I was going through the overseas registration exam. Anyone who's done that exam knows that the admin side of that takes a while. So for me, there wasn't that incentive to rush and get it open. So again, I was in a very unique position. But I've been in conversation with Murray, and I've explained that maybe at one point in life you may be piecemeal like I was, but now as a practice principal of a busy private practice, a lecturer, someone who's doing a bit of further study, someone who jumps onto these kind of calls, I'm actually quite time poor now. So for me, I could never do a piecemeal project again, and neither would I be interested in it. So I'm looking at refurbishing my practice, looking at building. I've had a couple of chats with Murray about putting 3 more surgeries potentially on our first floor. We project managed that and planned it early doors, but we made the sensible decision to just plumb 2 chairs in on the ground floor and then slowly build. For me to even think about doing more than that, it's taken 3 years to even realistically think about it. More than likely, that project may start in 2026. So obviously, I've gone on a bit of a spiel here, so I'll just summarize what I'm saying. For me, piecemeal was the right thing. Yeah, Murray, go for it. Sorry.
Right, just to add to a great point you made there, and something to factor in is the property that's chosen. Tahid, your situation was quite fortunate, I suppose, in that building you had the freehold of it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I was going to come to that at some point, but you go for it.
No, I was just going to quickly mention, and we do projects with that, but typically projects our clients have a leasehold, and a leasehold comes with a rent-free period generally. And something we've seen in the last year or two is those rent-free periods shortening up. It was quite common go back pre-COVID to get 9 months, 12 months sometimes rent-free. These days, 3 months, 6 months seems to be almost a maximum. So you've got a time window, you've got time pressure to get it done and get open and earning. That isn't the same for everyone though, and I also think that's a key factor. If you own the building or you haven't got time pressure to start earning an income, then the time factor, the fact that Tawhid took 6, 9, 12 months, whatever it did, wasn't a big deal because of his personal circumstances at that time.
Yeah, I need to emphasize that for me as a piecemeal character, and I think that's why Murray sort of wanted me to come on to this, because my situation was very unique, firstly, but secondly, I've worked with Anglian over the last 5 years, so I will emphasize that point. Even with our project, and Murray will attest to this, like any fit out, there will be, mind the pun, teething issues after everything's actually been fitted, because you actually need to run the chair. So my practice is a private boutique squat. So I'm not seeing your 30, 40 patients that some mixed practices would see. I'm only seeing 5 or 10 because I'm quite a leisurely dentist at best. So a lot of the potential wear and tear that will happen with chairs and equipment hasn't really happened for me, quite fortunately, even though I've got a Belmont Voyager and I highly recommend it. It's a workhorse chair. I haven't had that exposure. But one thing I'll finish on from my case study story that I'll say is please, 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 and I emphasize this, please crunch your numbers correctly before you even step into the idea of a squat. We're talking 225, 350, 450, 500,000 pounds is a substantial amount of money to be laying down on a private squat. So please do your finances and understand what you actually need to be earning. Because I'll say it quite openly, and I talk numbers with everybody. I'm a businessman at heart. My operating cost of my squat are between 16 and 25,000 pounds per calendar month. And that's someone who actually has a freehold. So I'm in a very fortunate position, as Murray did say, and a lot of rents and rates are going up. A lot of cost of staff is going up. I can tell you from my own experience, the hourly rate demands from staff are going up. The national insurance contributions are going up. Tax is going up. Unfortunately, when people see the word dental or wedding attached in front of everything, they like to chuck a few extra zeros on that also. Obviously, I say that for comedy value, but I'm sure Murray will attest that dental equipment is on the more expensive side. But for me and my story, I did piecemeal because I was in a very fortunate and privileged position at a very specific time in my life. But I can see both sides, and now I'm definitely a turnkey bloke. And when I go and add a couple more surgeries to my practice, I personally will use Anglian because we've got a good working relationship. They are not paying me. I am not sponsored. I've tried speaking to Murray about getting some backhand cashies. He won't do it. He's too ethical for that, but I've tried my hardest. But I and any of my colleagues and friends who ask me about the experience, I'm very open and honest. And I think that's another reason why Murray wanted me to speak on this, because I use quite colorful language in quite a specific way, but I'm quite straightforward and blunt about it. So one bit of advice to finish on for me before Murray leads on to any additions and questions is opening a squat will be the most challenging thing you will do in your life. But for me, after 5 years of doing it, it's one of the most rewarding. And nothing is more rewarding to me than going into my practice and servicing my patients in a way that is how I believe dentistry should be done. So have a clear vision, have a clear plan, know your numbers, and good luck and Godspeed. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tish. No, that's great. Very interesting. Just we thought I'd quickly ask you a question because your practice is I wouldn't say it's unique, but its location is quite special, isn't it? You made a choice to open a practice. It's a business park, really, isn't it? Your average squat is on High Street. So tell us why you made the decision on how that's been.
So for me, as Murray said, mine's in a business park, and the biggest word in dentistry I was always told is footfall, footfall, footfall. But I kind of bucked the trend a little bit, and mine's in a suburb in the middle of a business park, and it cannot be seen from the road. The reason I chose this option is, for me, this was an area that was close to my heart. I went to primary school 10 minutes walk away from my practice, secondary school 15 more minutes away from my practice. Lower Early is my community, and it's where I grew up. So for me, I've been all across the world, and I've been very blessed to lecture and teach internationally. I've been a student internationally, but home is home. And for me, home is where the heart is, as cheesy as that sounds. So for me, the challenges I had were actually having people know where we are. I went very old school. As I mentioned early doors, I bootstrapped it and wanted to keep costs low. I've only actually entered into digital marketing now, 3 years into owning a practice. most squats that I've spoken to squat owners. If you go on any of these squat courses or any of these talks, they're all about marketing, marketing, marketing. Because now in modern dentistry, you throw a stick and you hit about 5 dental practices. Patients have choice. And now with the challenges of getting NHS appointments, private practice is becoming more of a choice to your average dental patient. So for me, I again was in a very fortunate position financially where I could sit there as a clinician myself. I was there 7 days a week. It was me, a nurse, reception, and we did it, as I call it, bootstrap. I kept my costs as low as humanly possible, but again, I had the time. If you're someone who has an expensive lifestyle, if you've got a mortgage of your own, if you're renting, if you've got cars, if you've got a family, they're all a lot of external expenses that you need to factor into your daily life. And my location may not be the right location for you because you'll need to spend X amount. Most practice principles of squats, if you speak to them, on average, would say that they're spending on marketing anywhere between 5 and 15 grand a month without blinking. And that's an expense that you need to factor into your bottom line. Again, what Murray mentioned about mine, I'm in a very unique situation and I was blessed with time. But more and more now in modern society, we're very time poor. And as Murray was saying, rents are shooting up, rates are shooting up. The landlords are not as free with giving you those rent-free periods. So time is unfortunately your enemy in a squat build, and you want to get going and earning as much as you can. Like I said, my expenses are 16 to 20 grand a month, but my lights are still on, which if anyone can do basic maths will tell you that I'm earning at least that or maybe a touch more. So your earning potential is whatever you make it, and it can be 20 to 30 to 40 to 100 grand a month. So to me, the quicker you open your doors, the quicker you can do your skill, the quicker you can charm your patients, the quicker you can make back that money that you invested in a squat. So my little bit of advice, if you've got time on your hands, piecemeal is definitely the way to go. But if you're time poor, then turnkey just makes logical sense.
Thanks, Tahid. Yeah, it sums it up very well. Much appreciate you joining and the advice you've shared and the story you've told. We didn't want to make it long tonight. Keep it short and snappy. That pretty much rounds up what we wanted to go through. But we're very much open for any questions. Even if you're not sure if it's a sensible question or not, don't be afraid to stick it in the chat. If we don't get around to answering them all, we'll get in touch and clarify them later. But that was it from us for content. Please do feel free to let us know if you've got any queries. We'll give it a couple of minutes for any questions or anything else you want clarified.
One thing I'd like to add on, obviously, I'm more than happy, as you can tell, I like to have a little chat. If anyone's interested to ask any squat related questions, my name is obviously on the slide there. There's not many Tawheednesses floating around the world. You're welcome to follow me on socials and just shoot me a message. I pretty much just work 24/7, so I'll be pretty quick at getting back to you. And as I said, it's been a real blessing to be in a position to own my own practice. But if you're going into it thinking that you're an associate, your principal's the worst, you know what you're doing better than them, you think you're going to make more money as a principal than you will as an associate, I just want to stop you right there and say, as someone who's run a practice and invested in one for 5 years, that is not the case. And it will not be a case for a very long time. But more than happy to chat about the specifics. More than happy again to talk about my experience with Anglian when Murray's not around, so I can be even more colourful, I'm sure. But all jokes aside, before I sort of sign off and leave you, really great guys, like I said. But do your research. And I think Murray will say it to you. Murray will say they might not be the right company for you, and you might not be the right fit for them. And Turnkey might not be the right fit for you. One thing I will say is ask all the questions, do your research, look around. There's loads of different companies that do things in a different way. Just find what's right for you. And if you do want to invest in the journey, please just do your numbers. Go speak to your local bank manager. Banks can be very friendly with dental. They normally like to sort of give out loans to existing associates who've got a patient list. We're very good at getting money out of banking institutions. So go do your research, figure out what your costs will be, see what the local market's doing, what the local market will tolerate. One point I'd like to say, my situation is freehold. One last bit of advice I'd like to say, if you are in a position where you can get a freehold, get a freehold. I know that might not be a possible. Murray's worked with a lot of practices in London where that's just not feasible due to the astronomical prices. So going as a leasehold might be the right choice for them. If you've got the opportunity to go freehold, because unfortunately, I've heard stories where landlords can have some issues and it can potentially get you in a bit of a sticky situation. If you have to go leasehold, try and get the longest lease possible with some friendly breakout clauses if you never need to, and do forward planning. So for me, I planned 8 surgeries. So I went through all the planning process. Again, time was on my side, so I had time. I've actually got planning approval to fit 8 surgeries in my practice. That's already been done. That's already been signed off by the local council. I've done all the bits and bobs I've need to do. I don't need to speak to the local council again, but I future-proofed my practice growth. And that's something that I would emphasize with you, because a lot of my colleagues, and I think Murray will mention it again, I don't know if he agrees, but there are a lot of situations where practice outgrow their current practice setup and either have to shift location or knock into a next building. It can be very easy to outgrow your potential in the initial phase. So please plan. And yeah, planning and finances is what I'll finish on. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Very good. Thanks to Heed, and thanks everyone for joining. It's something we try and do every quarter. Try and hold a webinar and give some nuggets of advice out and focus on a different aspect. So please stay tuned to our socials, and recording will be made available. But any future events or webinars will be promoted as well. And just like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for the time. If you've got any particular questions or a project you want to discuss or anything really, just feel free to reach out to Heed or Georgina and myself. That's everything we wanted to go through tonight. Georgina, anything else you wanted to add, or ready to close it out?
I think that's good. It's been good. Yeah, as I said, any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me if you want to chat. I think most of you've got my number, so yeah, no, thanks for joining and have a good evening. Rest of your evening.
Thank you guys. Cheers.
Bye bye.